Hello everyone. Welcome to my teaching learning session. I am Sonal taking care of BPC, which is General Psychology for BA courses of students with IGNOU. Today we continue with our Unit 7, which is again going to be an expansive unit about human development. And today we are going to talk about the periods of human development, the lifespan development, and contextual influences that we'll talk about, which is 7.8 as per the book. Talk about contextual influence on development and a critical period that we should all know about human development. A period of time where growth is called as a critical or a sensitive period. Let's go ahead with today's session with understanding what are the periods of development that we are going to talk about in human development, which is 7.6 by the books. So, prenatal conception, the first that we talk about is always going to be the prenatal stage of development. We never miss out on the prenatal stage of development. The reason is the time before conception, in terms of having the child as an infant, and before that, which is conception, is equally important. So, the time from conception to birth is called prenatal. The one celled organism which stays in the body and all the food, all the shelter goes through the mother's womb to the child is prenatal development. One of the most sensitive periods that we don't realize for the child's development. Human development hugely relies on this stage of development. If prenatal stage of the child is very healthy, has been without any shock, without any sort of illness to the mother or the child, it actually dictates for the future life that the child is going to have a good healthy period and time of development in the future years. Then moving from conception, as soon as the child is born, the child is usually called an infant. Infant in universal terms in most areas. This is the time the child is 0 to 2 years of age. And yes, it is a dramatic change in the body that you find. Every change in the body is very drastic, no matter you see is this motor development, physical development, cognitive development starts. There are so many reflexes that we see in children. So this is one of those times where we tend to find dramatic changes in the body, in the brain of the toddler, and this support the emergency wide array of motor, perceptual, intellectual capacity as said, and first intimate tie also is taken care at this stage of development. So when we see a child forming a very good tie and bond with the mother, it's the time of infancy that it's visible to us that the child is forming such a bond with the primary caregiver, that is the mother. Moving to the next stage after infancy is the early childhood. Early childhood goes on from 2 to 6 years of age. This is also called the play years of the children life. The reason that we call them the play years is the children are mostly seen active in their school times at this point of time, and their motor skills, their physical development gets refined. We see a very evident change in their body from 2 years to 6 years, which is very true. At two, the child is just an infant, and by the time the child becomes four, five, and six, there's a huge growth that we tend to see in them in terms of their body, in terms of their brain, in terms of their motor capacity and strength. Something which initially motor wise, which is muscle development, was very slow and very less capable in terms of the body. At the age of 5 and 6 becomes very strong. The child becomes capable of holding things, um, you know tying laces, the shoe buttons, jumping around, running around with precision and clarity. So this huge change is seen in the players of the child life. Their skills get refined, that their thought and languages gets expand. You find them using huge array of words and a good vocabulary. There is a sense of morality also that tends to develop in children. So we do see these children forming a sense of morality. So when we speak about sense of morality, is the sense of rationality in the child in terms of the right and wrong according to what he or she perceives as per his age. Then moving ahead, after the early childhood development, which stays till 6 years, we have something which is called the middle years. Middle years are years just before the teenagers. It is a stage of development where you'll find a sudden change where children are so logical, so practically moving. You find children to be competing with one another strongly on the basis of their skills of literature, of maths, of science. They tend to develop a very good peer relationship with their friends. So, few of the most evident things in the middle childhood is logical development of sense. We tend to find them being very competitive or cooperative. These are some skills that tends to develop at this age, and peer group membership also becomes very important to them. So being affiliated to groups is a time which you'll find it in the middle years. The term of suggesting that human beings are social beings are very well justified from the age of, I feel, age 9 and 10. This is the time that we understand that affiliation to groups is important, being part of the groups is important. Their basic literature skills get enhanced, their understanding about who they are also gets better by the middle age. After the middle childhood years, we come to something which is the adolescent. Adolescent is also called the teenager years. And when we speak about the teenager years, these are years which is actually filled with a lot of stress and storm. Not only it's to the stress and storm of the cognition, which is the ability to think, reason, decide, but also at this stage we are talking about them being physically facing a lot of changes around themselves, which is body change. Their secondary and primary sexual development takes place, which also is not only very something which is overwhelming, but at the same time it also drives in a lot of anxiety in some children. So puberty leads to an adult-sized body, and also sexual maturity is also attained because of the primary and secondary sexual development that we tend to have. Thought becomes abstract, idealistic, and school achievements are more serious now. So, this is the time where children are at the class of 11th and 12th. Yes, the academic achievements are far more serious and far more stringent for them and important to them because they're heading out to another stage of life, which is adulthood. So they're more focused on your personal values, goals, development, and establishing a sense of autonomy in the family. This is the time, children are talking about having their own space. They need own freedom to decide things. So this is the teenager years, which is also called as adolescent, goes on from 11 to 18, 19 years of life to even 19. After 19, we move to early adulthood. Early adulthood goes on from 18, 19 to 40 years of life. This early time of life is somewhere where people finish their education, move towards careers, and establishing their work environment and doing the work, setting up a work, and family, marriage, intimacy, everything is formed. So major concerns here is developing a career, forming an intimate partnership or membership that converts into a blooming household, which is getting married, rearing children, and establishing a very healthy lifestyle, which is not only for themselves but also for the family. So, from career making, choosing careers begins with teenagers. For career making, establishing intimate relationship, getting married as settlement, having children, rearing them, and providing them a very healthy environment is something which will be seen in the early adulthood. And yes, early adulthood is a stage of disequilibrium. You do not achieve everything at according to your own wish and will. There is a lot of struggle in terms of when rearing a child, developing intimate relationship with a partner, incorporating a partner in the family, and also while procuring and thinking of extending a family. There's a lot of stress and adjustment that comes in this stage. After the early adulthood, we move to something which is called as the middle adulthood. Middle adulthood is the time where you'll find people have already progressed in their family lifestyles, and there's a lot of leadership positions that comes to them. Leadership positions will not only be established somewhere in the house, in the household only. You will find that people at the age of 45, 50 would also be holding very strong positions at their workplaces. They also must help their children being independent. So at this point of time, we are actually letting our children move for higher education. So we pull in this attribute in our children to become independent, to choose their careers. So something that we were doing in the early adulthood, we establish those things, instill those things in our children. So, and also, this is the time, 50 years is one of those time where in between two generations, the generation which is coming in front of you, which is of your children, and a generation which is going out. So there's a huge amount of adaptation which is required for parents during parenting at this stage. They also become more aware about their morality, about their ethics, about rationalities of the world when they interact with a new generation child, which who are getting retired at this point of time. There is a decreased sense in physical cognition, and health is also going down the hill at this point of time. There is no endurance and strength as much as we found it in the early and the middle adulthood. And This is the time where they actually, look back and see if their times and their life has been the way they wanted. So they reflect on the meaning of their lives at this stage, which is the later adulthood. Later adulthood is actually a stage where you can actually, where you can see your entire your entire stages of life, the way they've gone, how they have gone, and have they gone the way you really wanted. So this completes with the stages of periods of development that we had, from starting from conception till the later or late adulthood or old age. This completes with periods, and let's move to something which is lifespan development. Let's understand first the concept of what is lifespan development. Lifespan perspective was given by Paul Bates in 1987, and he considered that, as a result of multiple factors, a lot of different frameworks of development has come up with the passage of time. So he was the one who gave us the concept of development and its characteristics, stated that development is lifelong. The term lifelong, as mentioned on the screen, suggests that development keeps going on. No matter it is up the hill or down the hill, we do find physical changes, you do find a cognitive changes, you do find morality changes. So changes is something which is lifelong, which is in the form of development. Next that we talk about is development is multidimensional, which is very true. We just started. Development is multidimensional, speaking of the fact that it comes in different stages and in different ways, which is, there is physical development as a dimension, there is cognitive, there is motor development, there is morality development. So these are different dimensions of development. So development has multi dimensions to it. Then moving to the fact that it's multi-directional, very correctly said. It's a myth when people say that your development always have to be one direction, which is up the hill. No, we look at the later stages of life. Everything is deteriorating, which is when we talk about later stages of our life, we find that development does change its course from up the hill to down the hill. Physical development, when was going up till the middle of adulthood, there are times where you start getting ridden to, some sort of losing consciousness, not remembering, not a good memory, not good calculative power, thinking, reasoning not being as strong as middle adulthood, so it's going down. Physical health, losing weight, wrinkles on the body, strength going down. This is also opposite. So remember, it's always multi-directional. It can go up the hill, it can go down the hill, as accordingly you decide it to be. Then it is also stating that development is highly plastic. Plasticity is also something which is modifiability, something that you can stretch. So which is true. Any stage of your human development can become very, modifiable according to the kind of exposure and environment that we all are subjected to. So it can be highly plastic. A kind of skill that we want to develop can be developed at any point of time if we wish to, if we plan to modify it. So it says that development has that plasticity to it, which is modifiability. Every stage has that capacity to modify thoughts, probably physical strength, a skill, probably apart from skills also. We have any stage where we want to learn new things. It all can be done because development is highly plastic. Then moving to next, which talks about development is influenced by multiple factors around us or within us, which is very true. Physical development can be impacted with the kind of nutrition being provided, the kind of environment that we are. Intellectual capacity is also impacted by the kind of environment that we are a part of. So, for example, if you are not a part of a good environment, there are higher possibilities that intellectual capacity is not formed really well. So, it also depends on multiple factors that are surrounding us. So, development is impacted by these factors. So, this completes with the lifespan development given by Paul Bates, giving up some characteristics and telling that development is also called lifespan because it keeps going on throughout our lifespan from conception to death. So this completes with lifespan as a perspective as an introduction. Let's speak about some other, few new concepts that we should always talk about and remember when we talk about human development. One is the age grade influences. Age grade influences refer to influences which is specific to the specific age. Like infants will find developing bond with their caregivers. So attachment is one of the first thing which comes during infancy only. So that's an age graded influence that we have. Then teenagers, adolescent is one of those stage where we see children being very rebellious. They tend to loosen up their morality, the ethics goes down, and also in a good perspective, 18 plus, which is, transiting from adolescent, you can vote, you have driving license. So remember, these are those changes which are actually graded as per those age. Like for example, we cannot expect children to go for their board examination before 13 years of life, 13 to 14 years of life, which is class 10. So that's a kind of influence and the kind of stress that children goes through only during that stage of life, which is at that age. It cannot be experienced at the age of 8 and 9. Both cannot be experienced at the age of 8 and 9. It is an experience which is specific to that age. So that's called age graded influences. Then we talk about history graded influences. These are those influences which are there for a time of period where people were born with influences in their experiences. For examples, experience of a natural calamity, a freedom struggle which is seen by your grandparent. Like this is an example which Indians should know. There was a huge earthquake which was Bhuj in 2001 in Gujarat. That was an earthquake in Gujarat which was experienced extremely and massively by Bhuj. Is a history graded influence by the people living over there, their economic, socio-economic condition, their educational capacity, their medical facilities, everything was surrounded by that natural calamity that does become a history graded influence. People who are born in the families of freedom strugglers are also experiencing something which is history graded influences. Also, the introduction of mobiles and computers. I still remember, the first time we held a uh, small phone when we were young. It was very big. It had buttons in it, and it was an old phone, very heavy also. At the passage of time came by, we came down to lighter phones, more sturdy and stronger, then screen glass made phones, and then multiple cameras, etc. So we saw that introduction of mobile phones. So that is a kind of influence, a graded influence that we see of things being born, been around us, and we see how it's changing with the passage of time. So that's called as a history graded influence. Then moving to non-normative influences. Non-normative influences are influences that are shared by large number of people. It could be a cultural community people which is experiencing it, an event which has gone across an experience which has been experienced by people of one set of community or one set of area or one set of household. This could be divorces, separation, and children. All the children moving to abroad for education could be, a kind of non-normative influence for an entire family. So these completes with some very important influences that we need to know, which is age graded, history graded, and non-normative influences. This completes with some of the most important factors influencing human development. Let's move to contextual influence on development. Contextual is situation, at times it's socio-economic conditions also, and context is a situation. Let's see how do we understand this with a theory now. Yuri Bronfeld Benner gave us in 1979 one of the most influential theory, which was ecological. His theory was known as ecological system theory, which is applicable to people across the globe. So it was just not a theory which can be applicable to the Western world. The theory is equally applicable to the Indian world. Now, speaking of ecological theory of Yuri Bronfeld Benner, they stated that human development is influenced by many socio-cultural contexts, which is socio-cultural situations and environmental influences too. So when we speak about these influences, remember these cultural influences are act something which is going to be a part of that time, and not only these socio-cultural influences as it become a context of change for us, but there are other also which could be environment. So he viewed all of these situations and found that there are factors which are lying around us, which impact us, which can be labeled as ecological factor. He named as ecological because he envisioned the environment consisting of many structures. So he saw that our environment can be divided into structures and can be stated as context which influences our development. So these environments are microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, and the last fifth one is called the chronosystem. Let's understand these systems. The first is called the microsystem. Micro is one of those systems that we interact with daily living. We interact with this system every day. This is one of the most direct system to us, which is very closely knit system. This could be family, peers, teachers, someone we talk to every day, someone who's impacting us every day. There's a direct interaction without any obstacles in between. Then we come to something which is the meso system. This is the second stage, not exactly a system comprises of factors, but this is a system which is connecting the two levels that we have, which is called the micro and exo. So meso is the connection between the micro and the exo. Exo includes those social contexts which we as an individual do not have a control. We will look into it as examples. Then we have macro system, one of the most external part, which is values, custom, religious customs, laws that are coming in the family. This is the most outermost level, as I said, does not have a specific context. It can keep changing. Its influence are not that direct, not that influencing also on us. Then we come to chrono system. This is again a graded influence. Not everybody goes through it. Chrono means time. So according to Yuri Bronfman Benner, it is a temporary time which, a temporary time. It changes quickly and it is referred to as any socio-historical event which has a massive impact, like a timely impact on us. So speaking of this, this is called the chrono system. These impacts which are temporary but have a massive impact could be socio-cultural events. It could be a war, socio-economic, uh, you know, difficulties, struggles for a long period of time. It could be an economic difficulty of the country. Like for example, pandemic did become a chrono system for all of us. A time where we were having health, uh, a pandemic, which led down to even impacted our economy, our living system, and a lot of people are still suffering from that. Their temporary chrono is still going on, and for some others, they have recovered. So let's understand this in terms of an image, which is a beautiful image, gives you what a ecological theory of Yuri Bronfenbrenner talks about. See, the first circle is you. It's the individual with his own self of ideas, experiences, health, gender, and sex. Then is the micro, which is the school peers. This is your family. This is people that you interact every day. Your neighborhoods also can become if you interact with them every day. Then we have the meso, which is the connecting thing between the exo and the micro. So exo is something that does not have a direct impact, but it's lying there, which could be neighbors around. It is television, mass media, social welfare organization, the legal systems, the family friends that you have, which is called the exo. And macro, as we understood, it's the attitudes of the culture. It's also talks about your religious and customs, which does not have a direct impact on people. And so is chrono system, which is the long time bound thing, which is temporary in nature. It is that patterning of environmental events and transition over the life course, which can lead to major changes in people's life. And for some people, it could be very temporary. So this finishes with the ecological theory of Yuri Bronfenbrenner, a globally correct, theory it is. I'll give you an example. Let's take an example how these systems impacts you. Let's take an example in the middle as an individual that you are, and you have working parents. Working parents will have a very close knit thing with the school also. Remember, a note going from school to your mother's mobile number and also in your almanac can impact the kind of interaction that you have with your family that day. So, see, that is called the micro. Now, exosystems are family, friends, and people who could be your mother's workplaces, father's workplaces. It could also be mass media. So, imagine a child gets a new phone because he's 10, 11, and parents are working. So, the child needs to be independent and given them a phone. Now, through that phone, the child gets exposed to so much of shopping sites, so much of gadgets that he sees in that social media, and he demands a gadget, a new gadget, because what he's seen. He demands shopping because he see online sites, influencers, also speaking of it. So this is something which impacts not directly but through indirect. So it's impacting your microsystem also. Also family friends, like let's take an example, any family friend of your parents. I've seen you going somewhere which your parents might have not been aware of. Remember that knowing can impact the relationship again with your family, because that family friend might have told that I saw your child over here, he was without anyone, no consent that you gave, how he or she there, I hope he or she is safe. Such a conversation and information coming to you as a microsystem can impact your development. It might stop you from going outside for a couple of time, impact your social development, can impact your social interaction with people around. So this is how these systems becoming the cultural, environmental background and situation impact us development. So this completes with the Yuri Bronfenbrenner's Yuri Bronfenbenner's ecological system of theory, globally applied to all of us, and very, very impressive theory it was. Now, moving to the critical period hypothesis, which I stated in the beginning, it's one of the very important things that we miss out while we all are growing up. We need to know about this period and this hypothesis really well. This hypothesis states that there is a biologically determined time, which is determined time period during which children are most sensitive to external environment and than any other time. So this environment, if any impact is given onto you, it can probably make you bloom or probably can give a very wrong direction to your development. So children's nervous system is most sensitive at this point of time, which is environmental stimuli is the reason for the child does not receive any appropriate stimuli during critical period. The child will not be able to process those environmental stimuli in the future, which is very true. When a child is an infant needs to interact and has have a very global interaction, no matter it's social interaction, cultural interaction, physical development, motor reflexes, everything needs to be there. If there is lack of stimulation, remember the child will not be able to accept those stimulations in the later life. So, speaking of that, critical period is extremely important. A sensitive period also during which learning is possible. So, that's also labeled as a sensitive period. There is a diagram which talks about critical period. See, a period where development is at height, it's at a bone stage. We can develop and give rise to umpteen amount of learning and skills for our future living. So that's critical period, which finishes with Unit 7 to us. Unit 7 today we spoke about the stages of development, the periods of development. We spoke about Yuri Bronfenbenner's theory of development, and also that human development happens through ages, and there are many influences which could be age-graded influences, history-graded influences, and non-normative influences that impacts our development. This completes with Unit 7, making us move ahead to Unit 8. Unit 8 is similar to the prior units, which talks about development in terms of stages. Some theory that says that how development are different according to two different psychologists today that we are going to talk about. Today we are going to talk about Sigmund Freud's theory and Erik Erikson's theory of human development. So speaking of Erik Erikson, we've already did speak about something which was human development in terms of Sigmund Freud earlier. Sigmund Freud was a psychoanalytical theory holder. He was the first person who gave rise to psychoanalytical forum. He was a professor, a psychiatrist who studied clinical psychology later, and he stated one of the most radical thoughts in the times of psychology of human development. He stated that unconscious is the manifestation of our behavior. So the unconscious motives and drives, your behavior is a manifestation of unconscious motives and desires. So your behavior is now product of what? Unconscious feelings and desires, unconscious motives, which ideally are not visible. So unconscious was his central thesis of work, and he also referred that desires, needs, and motivation are which are we are not aware of, something which have happened long time ago that we are not aware of right now, really drives our behavior in today's time. So this was Sigmund Freud's thought. Let's start with his theory. What all did he give? Sigmund Freud, to explain his work and to explain the concept of unconscious and sexual desires and biological drives, gave three tasks and three work in his tenure of identifying the psychoanalytical theory. The first was the topographical model of psyche. Then we have the stage model, which is the structural model of personality. And then we have something which is called as the psychosocial and psychosexual stages of development. Psychosexual stages is Sigmund Freud. It's not social. It's psychosexual stages. And let's begin with the first, contribution of Sigmund Freud to which led to the development of his psychoanalytical forum, which is called the topographical model of psyche. That is, he divided the mind into three levels, which is called the unconscious, conscious, and the subconscious or the preconscious. According to him, the top of the iceberg that you can see in the diagram, which is in the shape of topographical, which is in the shape of the iceberg also, says that these are those information, thoughts, and feelings and actions which we are constantly aware of at the moment also. So probably the time that you need to do something later, a course of action that you need to do something later being there in your mind is called the conscious awareness. Now, Subconscious or preconscious deals with information that is not readily available right now. These are memories and stored knowledge, but once you go back, revise, you will be able to retrieve them. So it's retrievable. It's these are memories and thought process that you've stored in your mind, and that they can come back also. Then moving to the last one that we speak about is the unconscious one. This was a level of mind which actually dwell in a lot of controversy, a lot of rejection to Sigmund Freud's idea, was unconscious level. Unconscious level speaks about having those feelings, fears, violent motives, unacceptable desires, especially sexual and biological unacceptable desire, irrational wishes, immoral urges, shameful experiences, some selfish needs, shameful thoughts that we are not aware of, and why these needs, fears, motives are here when they're unacceptable, because they cannot come up to the level of conscious in the society is going to discard it. That's why these are a part of your unconscious feelings and unconscious level. These are those parts that we cannot readily be available to. So that means these are those information that you cannot retrieve back. They are not available to you right now, probably not available to you from the past 20 years also that you've lived. So these are those irrational wishes that we cannot see through. Never. So this was three levels that Sigmund Freud said that your mind is divided into and functioning: conscious, sub-preconscious, and the unconscious level, which talks about dividing into the three. Now, when we know that the mind is divided into three, this is how where your information and what kind of knowledge goes in. Our mind also has structure that leads to the kind of behavior. So the kind of behavior that is coming out is because of three components and structures that are there in our personality. So once these three structures, the way that these three structures interact, the way that these three structures are a part, so these are those parts that actually results into your behavior. This is called id, ego, and superego. Remember, these are three components that speak about, three components that talk about you and your behavior coming out of the interaction of these three. I'll give you multiple examples to understand them. Let's understand the first component, which is called the id. It operates unconsciously completely. We are unaware the way we are doing these actions. It deals with our basic instincts. Instincts are things and desires and feelings which are not controllable. So they are out of our control. They are those basic primitive because they are basic instincts, which is hunger, thirst, and sexual desires and shelter. And these are primitive in nature from birth. They actually form the other parts also. They're coming like from it. Other parts of the personality also comes in, which is ego and superego. To remember, so remember, it is such an important part of our personality. Yes, it works on pleasure principle. It is shameful. It has the tendency to avoid pain and seek more pleasure. It is disregarding the social values. It has this thing of disregarding social values. Then we move to something which is ego. Ego is that part of your mind which is the reality principle, which works according to the reality of the world, reality of the society. So ego works according to the reality principle, which is it will make you achieve your aid, which is the gratifications will take place, the satisfactions of primitive needs will take place, but by delaying the aid, but by delaying the primitive gratification to one day, half an hour, probably an hour or 2 hours, and it make you aware. They make you accept the aid, make you successfully achieve the desires of aid, but by realistic ways, which is according to reality checks of the world. Then we have the last one, which is called the morality principle. This is the moral group. This talks about not to be doing something which is not correct. This is the rational part of you, the ethical value of the society through which we socialize. So superego is something that you get by socializing in the environment. This is something which our parents makes us do. They tell us the appropriate behavior and the inappropriate behaviors, and it controls the impulses and urges of ego and id also. So it does not allow you something which is not to be done. It's a complete no. And also, the superego comprises of two different kinds, which is called the conscience. Conscience is the rationality part of a situation, and the other is the self, the ideal self. So, out of the socialization that parents give you of the rationality and the world, you develop a kind of ideal self which does not want to, which wants to be like the way the society wants them to be, or their super ego, which is their family wants them to be. And conscience is something always being correct and rational because they don't want to be punished. They want to avoid punishment and be correct all the time. So superego comprises of two, as we speak about something which is conscience and ideal self. I'll give you an example of how our behavior is dictated at times through all of this. Let's take an example. And there's a child who wants to have a chocolate right away. So as we talk about the id, the child just goes to the kitchen, grabs the the container of the cookies, open it, jumps on the on the kitchen slabs, open the container and eats it away. Complete primitive diet. It is complete satisfaction of your hunger, which is again a primitive and a basic need. So did we see there is no sort of regret. There is no consensus to the morality or to the ethics. We want to avoid pain and seek pleasure. We just want to seek pleasure and eat the chocolate, and the child ate it. Now, let's take another example. The same child goes to the kitchen, wants to have the cookie, but then feels, no, I will not have cookie. I was told no today. I will be getting one in the evening only. I cannot. Moves out quietly out of the kitchen. This is the super ego. A complete banishing of your id and your ego. Then we speak about the ego. Now this child comes inside, feels like having a cookie before the meals also, and is thinking what to do. Goes to the mother and says, "You give me one less cookie and give me a permission to have one right now." So what are we doing? We are seeking permission. Reality check. This is the reality principle. Being so young, you need to take permissions from your parents. So here we do get a cookie, we do get something which is satisfying our desires, but through reality checks. So we delayed it a little. We couldn't just instantly go and open the jar. We had to wait for the mother to get free, then give you a cookie. So this is something which works according to the reality principle. Let's give you another example for this. Speaking of another thing, let's take an example. There's a 500 rupee note lying on the road, and it is going to be going up, and without watching around, quickly picking it up and putting it in your pocket. That's instinctive gratification of needs. That talks about id. Then, speaking of superego is going to be, no, it's not mine. Let's not look at it. I'm not going to touch the 500 rupees note. It is not mine. I cannot be touching it. Now, this is superego, completely banishing your desires of it. Then we come to something which is the ego. Ego speaks about something which is going to talk about. Ego is taking permission or probably delaying the gratification with the passage of time having it, but by delaying it. Now you pick up the 500 rupee note, ask everyone around, the worker, the guard, the people around, sit with it for a while. No one comes, wait for them for half an hour or so. You are around the same area, no one comes to ask you. The rupee note is yours. So you took permission, you asked people, you made sure that you tell it to the guard doesn't know, you hold it on for a while, no one comes and you take it with you. So this is the ego, which is called the reality principle. This is how most of our daily life behaviors are dictated by id, ego, superego, according to Sigmund Freud. So it is, I want that right now. Ego is, let's see, we maybe compromise a little, make some changes and achieve it. And superego is, it is not right, so we are not doing it. So that completes with it, ego, and superego as an understanding. Let's move to the third part of Sigmund Freud's development, which was called as ego defense mechanism. There are so many things that he gave, and ego defense mechanism was given to let you know that ego has a struggle to always gratify your id, but in consent to the reality. So there's a lot of pressure on ego also to make you achieve your primitive needs. So there is so much of anxiety which ego goes through. So to protect the ego, the person, to protect the person from the anxiety of the ego and stress, we solely rely on some defenses which are called ego defense mechanism. So let's take an example. As soon as you see a 500 rupee note and you need it, there's a sense of stress and anxiety that comes in. Agar someone else will, go and pick it up. Oh God, there's going to be another third person that comes and retrieves it, that thing, and pick it up. there's a sense of anxiety that dwells into you. So, to manage that anxiety, we have defenses which are many in number, which is called denial, displacement, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, repression, and sublimation. Denial talks about refusing and admitting that that event really happened or that situation really happened. Displacement is transferring your appropriate or inappropriate or anxiety provoking urges and feelings on onto something which is more acceptable and less less threatening as a target. So let's take an example. You have an aggression towards your sibling, but you go out and fight and shout over your friend. So that's called displacement. Then we talk about projection. Projection is attributing unacceptable desires to others, which is telling your feelings by keeping it on other people, which is this is such an amazing example given that Chris often cheats on the boyfriend or the partner, but because she suspects him already, always cheating. So it's Chris who often, betray the partner, but it's always suspecting the partner to do so. Also, you have cheated in your examination, but you're telling that it's the other person who always does it, and it's so immoralistic, which is you actually vent out your feelings by putting it onto others, projecting it onto others. Rationalization is excuse giving, which is justifying the behaviors by substituting it by less acceptable reasons. Then we talk about reaction formation. Reaction formation is reducing your anxiety by adopting something which is a complete opposite of the feeling which is inducing anxiety, which is like a very good example. Nadia is angry with her co-worker, and co-worker Beth, as she always arrives late to work after a night of party and after a night of being outside. So, but what did Nadia says about Beth in front of everybody? That Beth is very hardworking, she's very cool, and she's quite agreeable. So, what did we do? We had a feeling of hatred towards that girl, but we justifiedly been with her and labeled her as cool and nice. So that's reaction formation, a complete opposite. Regression is returning to a coping strategy for less mature stages of development. Repression is suppressing your feelings, like some thought, painful, bad, aversive feeling that you don't want to be a part of is something which is regression. That is repression. And sublimation is redirecting the unacceptable desire to a socially unacceptable channels, which is doing something and then holding charity for it. So that's something which is called sublimation. That completes with ego defense mechanism. Let's move to the psychosexual stages of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud stated that there are 5 stages of development. So according to him, your development starts at the age of 0 and it goes on till the age of 16, 17, and by that stage we are completely developed. So according to Sigmund Freud, there are 5 stages. Every stage a child needs to a child has a conflict at that stage and has to achieve. There is a successful achievement in that stage that needs to take place. If that achievement does not take place, there's going to be fixation, which is arresting of the development over there. So the development is incomplete over there and there is dissatisfaction, which could also continue to later lives. So fixation is arrest in that stage of development, and it could probably lead to further dissatisfaction in later life. So this is one important thing that we need to remember in psychosexual stages of development. Also, another thing that in Sigmund Freud stages, as there's a conflict, that conflict comes in because there is an erogenous zone that needs to be satisfied, a zone in the body or in the being which needs to be satisfied. If that is satisfied, the conflict is not there. If it is not, then fixation takes place. Let's start with all the stages of development quickly and completed. There are 5 stages starting from oral stage. Oral is starting from the birth to 12 months. And when we talk about the oral stage, it talks about the infants getting pleasure from the mouth. So obviously the child is completely dependent on the mother for feeding, suckling, and all of this needs to be adequately done. So remember one thing, that adequacy is the key in every stage of development. Over mouth stimulation and under mouth stimulation can lead to fixation. So if for example a child is able to get satisfied, the mouth is stimulated for 2 years, there's a sense of love and trust developed in the child successfully moves to the later stage. But for example, if the child is left alone crying, not being fed on the time, not feeded well, and weaning is also done inappropriately, which is breastfeeding is also done very inappropriately to the child, remember this will lead to non-satisfaction of the mouth and can lead to fixation in the form of drug addiction, chewing gum, talking too much, any sort of addiction which happens to the mouth, which is alcohol, drugs, it could be food obesity, etc. Let's move to the second stage. For example, if there is a successful completion of the first stage, we move to the second, which is called the anal stage. The zone here is the anal area, which talks about toilet training, relationship between the parents. So this is the stage where the focus, the pleasure focus is on the genital area, which is retention and expulsion. The children are made to learn toilet training because by 3 years of the age, the child will move to the outer world. Exposure will go to the outer world. They need to be trained well to manage their body. If they're overtrained, remember they are going to be very fidgety, very overly um, occupied by cleanliness that could lead to features of OCD in the later life. If they're under, what do you call this? They're understimulated and not taken care in terms of the stage is not being satisfied. And the toilet training has been very, very abruptly done, which is abruptly as in the toilet training is not being told to the child. They have not been told you need to go to the washroom, wash your hands, pull up your pants, zip it up, button it up, put your dresses down. All of this is not appropriately done and is inadequate. Remember, the person is going to be dissatisfied, disorganized, very messy as a personality, and very erratic later in life. So, adequacy is the key, which is telling the child to use toilet adequately, the expulsion and retention, the relationship between the child and the parent to be balanced. Then coming to the next is called the phallic stage. Phallic stage is a little inappropriate to Indian scenarios. This was a stage where children focus comes to genitals now. Genitals, as in this is the time at 6 years and 5 years, children know that I am a male and my parent are also something which is an opposite gender. So this is the time children realize that their parents have a different relationship and they have different genitals. And I have a different genital than my mother, and my father has the same genital. And we tend to hold a different relationship with our parents. So this was actually the stage was built on real life story of an Oedipus, as you see on the image, Oedipus for boys and Electra for girls. Oedipus was a prince who killed his father because he fell in love with his mother. So this was a real story that happened that Oedipus actually killed his father to fall in love with his because he fell in love with his mother. So to satisfy that that need, every child goes through that period according to Sigmund Freud, where there's a sense of jealousy towards the mother if you're a girl child and a sense of jealousy towards your father if you're a boy child, and it's called Oedipus in boys and Electra in girls. Now, in Indian scenario, we always do not experience all of this. So there is a sense of resolution has to happen. Not everyone will kill their parent. So how does this happen? There's a sense of jealousy that, with the passage of time, by the age of 5, which starts from 3, 4, that jealousy is straight to height at 5. And there's a sudden change, whereas the jealousy changes into admiration for the same-sex parent. So Oedipus was the real king, the prince who fell in love with his mother. So for example, if Oedipus would have had admiration towards his father, he would have role modeled the father, thinking that my mother likes such people. So role modeling the father, the admiration comes in, that the resolution of the stage happens, that the hostility towards the same sex parent is reduced. So is the children in girls. Did we ever realize that girls wear the attires of their mothers and show it to their fathers to see how they're looking? This is the admiration and role modeling which has resolved the stage. If there is jealousy, there's going to be hitting to the mother, crying for the father's time, a lot more than that, which is the phallic stage. If the phallic stage is really solved properly, we move to the next stage, which is latency. If it is not, it could lead to erratic behaviors later. It could lead to psychological disorders. According to phallic stages, there could be a confusion in masculinity, femininity in later times. Then moving to latency stage of it's a stage where we are 7, 8, and 11, and sexual tendencies and urges are completely suppressed. Our interest now goes to social interaction, forming intellectual skills. So here an interlude happens, which is a passage of time, which makes us forget everything that happened before. So we do not remember the sexual desires or anything, but we are moving towards intellectual capacity development. So the stage is actually focusing on intellectual development, and if there are desires which are still lingering from the last stage, that is leading to conflicts in the stage that could lead to not forming of good social relationship with friends, family, and not having a good peer group. It could also lead to low academic records. Then coming to the last stage, according to Sigmund Freud, which was the time of puberty, which is the genital stage, a stage of a very holistic heterosexual development, a source of pleasure seeking times, which happens outside the family, which is children learn to develop heterosexual relationship. This is the time, at the time of 12, 13, 14, children have crushes on opposite gender, forming relationship, liking for the other people, which is very healthy. If it is capable, a child is able to capably form such relationships, fall in love, like people heterosexually in a dominant fashion of our country, which we accept. That's the thing which is successful development of this stage. So, according to Sigmund Freud, every stage is a conflict that needs to be resolved. Not happening leads to fixation. So, let's just conclude his theory. Sigmund Freud stated that behavior is a manifestation of unconscious wishes and desires. That wishes and desires are mostly sexual in nature. Our personality is divided into id, ego, superego. So the kind of behavior that you display is according to which is more, impactful in your personality. Is the id? Is it the ego more impressionable or the superego? Then we talk about ego, using ego defense mechanism to take care of the anxiety, and the last stage is stages of human development, which is called the psychosexual stages of Sigmund Freud. That we develop in the stage of 5 from 0 to puberty. Now, after this came Erik Erikson, who was fairly a very good friend of Sigmund Freud, but he moved away from Sigmund Freud because of the reason of psychosexual development. Erikson stated that we have psychosocial development, not sexual. His theory was called psychosocial development, and he stated my theory is something which goes on from the first stage till the last year of our life. So, zero to death, his stages from zero to death. So also he discarded the sexual development. He said that our cultural orientation needs to be taken in consideration. Not everything is sexual urges. Not everything is body desires. So few of the things that we need to know about Erik Erikson's theory is epigenetic principle. Epigenetic principle is development functions by epigenetic principle that a personality develops a predetermined order, which is if you are successful in the first stage or underdeveloped in the first stage, that will keep going on. So the epigenetic principle is something that happens in the first two stages is something your trend of development will be. So that's epigenetic. Psychosocial virtues and strength. This stated that each stage has a virtue to be achieved. It's like a nature or quality to be achieved that requires an optimal time also. So if the stage is well managed, that virtue will be developed, that strength will be developed, that will help us form a positive epigenetic principle. So if the first stage is successful, the second stage virtue will also and strength will also be completed, and then further later. Then another point to be remembered is psychosocial maladaptation and malignance. Malignance is negative outcome. So if a child is not successfully passing through different stages, remember one can expect a healthy development, but it's also if the stage is passing successfully, you will have a good stage of development. But for example, the virtues are not being achieved, the epigenetic is going negative, you had failure in the first stage, then failure in the second, then inadequacy in the third, it will lead to unhealthy development, which is maladaptation and malignance, which represent negative outcome from unhelpful experiences through the crisis which we experience in every stage, which is there is either less of healthy development or more of negative outcome. So that is maladaptation is less of healthy development and malignance is more of negative development is happening. So both are in the negative aspects that could be unhealthy development of the child. Let's start with quickly and finish with the 8 stages of Erik Erikson, which is this. So the stages was also divided into age and stages. The first was trust versus mistrust. Let's take an example. A child is consistently be met by, his needs are met of love, affection, warmth, the mother feeding the child timely. So the child developed trust. Remember, during this stage, if the child is given very uncertain attention, is looked out at some time, the child is lying and crying all the time, there is instability in the care, it will lead to mistrust. So see the virtue, trust versus mistrust. Mistrust is a malignance and trust is a virtue being developed. Stability, constant care, stability in the child is being developed. Then we move to the next, which is early childhood, which is autonomy versus shape. See if the child is trustworthy. The child will have autonomy, which is the ability to decide for his life. He'll decide, he'll take personal control on his skills, on his activities. There's a sense of dependence. There's a sense of independence in the child. For example, if there's a mistrusted child, the child will always doubt about himself. I should not be doing this. I probably cannot cycle alone. I need my mother to be standing alone. Whereas an autonomous child is going to be confident, cycling, will fall down, pick up the cycle again. Why? The child have always received consistent care, consistent love, stability. That's why. Moving to the third is initiative versus guilt. So, if the virtue is autonomy, independence, the child will develop a sense of a sense of initiative. Initiative is a sense of independence in the child. Independence in terms of initiating activities, playgroup activities, taking the first call of me doing this first, going in, interacting first, by the end of introducing yourself, taking initiative of good things. Whereas if the other one is guilt, when the child is doubtful in the last stage, remember, how are you going to initiate activities? These are children who cannot read in class, cannot raise their hands, cannot start an activity. So that's like a virtue of initiative, malignance of guilt. If there is a lot of initiative, there comes industry, which is competence, a sense of being able to, the desire to be creative, productive, doing something new. Very productive endeavors are a result of such children. They will be able to cope with the demand of society, new learnings. On the opposite are going to be children who are inferior because they've been doubtful, they've been guilty about themselves. They cannot pick up an activity. Even if they pick up an activity, they'll come down to it. They do not want to learn new skills. They feel they cannot do it, and they feel they would not be able to accomplish it to the end. They experience a lot of failure. Success leads to a sense of competence. Failure leads to a high sense of inferiority. So that's completing with the school age time. Now we enter to the adolescent stage, as we see in this image. Also, adolescent is a time where there is a sense of identity, development of who we are. Remember, if you're initiative industrious, you know what who you are and what you want to be. What is your personal identity? What kind of careers? What kind of exploration? What kind of interning and vocational services you would want to do, and who you are in terms of your strength, weakness, and opportunity. In comparison to the opposite, if there's a malignance or maladaptation, that would be a role confusion. These people don't know what they want to do, what are their life, what are their careers. They are into experimental behaviors of drugs, getting into wrong behaviors, promiscuous sexual activities, losing their sense of identity, which is role confusion at this stage. A very critical stage this is, because if you develop an identity, you develop intimacy for your higher life, which is being able to have good heterosexual relationship, form good loving relationship with the opposite gender. Remember, if you fail to do this, you'll experience isolation, loneliness, alone, not being able to form intimate relationship. After this stage, this is the time that you get married, being able to marriage, form mature relationships, comes the middle childhood, middle adulthood. Middle adulthood is the time that we move towards generativity, being able to generate for your children. And if you're not able to do that, there is a sense of stagnation. Income stagnant, family life stagnant, not contribution, not leaving anything for your children, not making a mark, carving a niche, not being an example or a role model. Then come to the last virtue, which is ego integrity, which is that integrity, the final stage, that I'm able to develop so much for my generations ahead. I've left so much worth, money, asset, and caliber for them. That finishes with ego identity and despair. This sums up with Unit 8. Thank you very much.